Season 4, Volume 1 of perhaps one of the most awaited shows of 2022 is here, and that too with a bang. This season, Stranger Things is bloodier, more ominous, and definitely crazier than ever before, just when we thought that the last 3 seasons had it all. The directors and producers surely took their fair share of time in getting the season out and running, making the fans wonder, how much more upside down does the show have to be for it to reach the audience? Record-breaking viewership. After a nearly 3-year-long break, one of the Netflix flagship series revived itself on the 27th of May, 2022. For Netflix as an entertainment platform, these past couple of months have been stagnant and rough, with no new releases having the potential in creating a global buzz or generating sufficiently large revenues. Netflix knew it could bank on Stranger Things, considering every season, the show gets bigger and better. Not surprisingly, Season 4 has already been watched for around 300 million hours by people all around the globe already, breaking the record of Bridgerton Season 2, and setting itself as the most-watched English show in the world. So it's safe to say that the fans have been faithfully watching it, and the show has indeed attracted fresh viewership. Additions to the Stranger Things family. Something that's never happened before in the history of Stranger Things is that the show has been divided into 2 volumes, 1 and 2. The first volume has been released with a total of 7 episodes, while the second volume is yet to be aired on the TV, making the viewers more impatient than ever. What's primarily evident in this season is the introduction of new faces into the cast, such as Joseph Quinn as the infamous Eddie, and Jamie Campbell as Peter Ballard. Fascinatingly, the pre-existing cast from Season 1 has been growing up as the show progresses. So Eleven, Mike, Dustin, and Will, who were once kids, are now full-grown teenagers. Also, spoiler alert, the season introduces a heinous demonic villain called Vecna, who is shown to be mercilessly murdering the people of Hawkins. Episode durations. Now, the first 3 seasons of the show were based primarily in the town of Hawkins, but the upside-down element of this season adds a little variety to the places they've shot the show in. When the evil parallel dimension is shown, known as the Upside Down, various scenes of that dimension are known to be shot in places like California, Utah, and Alaska. Interestingly, the makers of the show have found their new norms, exceeding the 1-hour at max episode durations of seasons 1 to 3. For the recent season, having almost an hour and 15 minutes long episodes was the usual scenario. If this surprises you, wait till you hear the running time of the 2 July episodes. First episode, an hour and a half. Second one, 2.5 hours long. COVID-19 and release delays. Taking the unrealistically long episode durations into consideration, it is somewhat justified as to why the making of this particular season took about 3 years to form, but the director has more to say about this one. Sean Levy, producer and director of this brilliant show, gave reasons for the excessive delay, saying that the COVID-19 pandemic was one of the biggest contributing factors. According to Levy, the consequences of the pandemic all hit the producers one by one. The initial lockdown, followed by stringent COVID protocols, simply delayed each and every scene. Other than that, as mentioned earlier, the season required being shot in multiple countries, and so it was natural that the filming and editing took longer than usual. Eleven's doppelganger. If you've seen the 4th season already, did you ever wonder how the filmmakers were able to show a much younger Eleven in the current Eleven's flashbacks? It's impossible to have shot the scenes with Millie Bobby Brown years before they had to be incorporated into the new season. So is it CGI or some other scientific technique? Turns out, the filmmakers were just absolutely spot on in getting Millie's junior doppelganger on board, aka Marty Blair. Pictures of Millie with Maddie on sets of the show surfaced all over the internet, making it perhaps the most mind-boggling and yet the most adorable doppelganger duo ever. Marty even showed her gratitude through an Instagram post, mentioning that Millie helped her every step of the way, making the scenes awesome. We're truly in awe with this one. Noah and Millie's roll-up fruit by the foot competition. The cast this season might be looking all grown up, but the inner child of Millie and Noah was alive and thriving on the sets of Stranger Things. On The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, Millie showed a video clip of Noah and her engaging in a fruit by the foot competition where the fastest person to eat a fruit roll-up wins. This idea had stemmed from Millie and Noah being immensely bored on the sets as the filming process was extremely time-consuming and exhausting. And so, as per the video, Millie won the competition, having eaten the roll-up much faster than Noah. Duffer Brothers strive for perfection. It might be a shocker that a show so ahead of its time incorporated horror references and looks from the 1980s to continue the dark-running theme of the show. According to the Duffer Brothers, co-creators of the show, the end of the first episode, where Chrissy hallucinates right before getting murdered by Vecna, is an inspiration from a scene of A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3. Caleb Heyman, cinematographer of Stranger Things, mentioned that the drive for perfection for every shot and the need to communicate the exact emotions to the audience made the Duffer Brothers opt for extremely specific camera movements. Heyman claimed that such abrupt movements, big push-ins, and certain angles created the desired effect in scenes. Matching skin tones with places. This show has broken the records for a reason. The attention to detail of the makers is insane. The cinematographer explained how maintaining the right skin palette for each of the characters in Season 4 was given careful consideration. The colorist, Skip Kimball, worked wonders in not only matching the skin tones from previous seasons with Season 4, but also different characters in different locations had their skin tones aligned with their respective locations. So if a scene was shot in California, warmer and richer tones were given to the characters. As for Hopper, who was held hostage in Russia, the tone was more of a mixture of green and blue, giving him a pale and tortured tone and appearance. Script sizes and complexities. Season 4 went all out with the broad storyline, expanded episode durations, and the plot complexities. Apparently, even the shorter scripts were much longer than the usual script of an episode. The shorter scripts would contain 70 pages worth of storyline, whereas the final episode, aka the 2.5-hour finale, had a storyline which went on for 115 minutes. With 300 scenes shot in the final episode, and an ample amount of scenes in the other episodes of the season, the showmakers had no time to spare. They would always be running on a time crunch, and the increased complexity of the storyline isn't helping the situation. So, it was nothing short of a constant hustle by the makers to create an entire movie's worth of content in merely a TV show schedule. Making of Vecna. The Mind Flayer was frightening enough, but the makers kicked it up a notch by introducing the Demogorgon, an even more horrific demonic creature. This wasn't it for them. Vecna Season 4's villain is all set to make regular appearances in our nightmares. In an interview, the prosthetics designer of Stranger Things, Barry Gower, explained how the making of Vecna wasn't just an ordinary piece of work. Rather than making a rubber monster suit for the actor just to wear like any other costume, Barry applied the prosthetics to the actor's skin, glued things onto the face and the body of Jamie Campbell to make it look more realistic and create more depth in the appearance of Vecna. According to Bauer, around 2,400 prosthetic pieces were glued onto Jamie, which took Bauer a total of 8.5 hours. By looking at the previous villains of the show, we can safely say that the makers have a certain obsession with making the monsters look wet and slimy. So, for the final touches, Vecna was covered with glossy slime, making it look even more physically horrendous and disgusting. Budgets per episode. Now, the show doesn't become such a huge hit or a blockbuster with merely good luck. Endless number of hours, never-ending efforts, and most importantly, huge sums of money have to be put into the making for the end product to be watch-worthy. According to some inside information, we found out that making one episode of Season 4 cost approximately $30 million. Netflix has always been known to go above and beyond in its extravagant spending on shows, some turning out to be massive hits while the others barely breaking even. In the past few months, Netflix has seen a drop in its overall viewership. The number of subscribers have fallen, and the entertainment company has also downsized as a result. Perhaps this explains why Stranger Things will be saying its final goodbyes by the end of Season 5. Its bigger size, bigger budget, and consequently, might just be putting Netflix in deep waters. Zoom sessions with Billy. Having to shoot Season 4 amidst COVID-19 protocols and restrictions, the makers faced problems in getting all of the cast on set for their respective scenes. As for Dacre Montgomery, the actor who played the late Billy Hargrove, Zoom proved in handy to get a cameo shot in Australia without having to make it all the way to the sets in Atlanta. Director Sean Levy oversaw the entire cameo filming over Zoom, which according to Dacre was indeed a huge blessing. Vintage outfits. If you notice the outfits of the characters in the show, they give off a vintage, more of a 1980s vibe rather than the fashion and style that is prevalent today. The costume director of Stranger Things, Amy Paris, when she began collecting the looks for Season 4, she had the 1980s outfits of California in her mind, and so the brand that had the potential to pull off such a style was Quicksilver, considering it ruled the fashion industry at the time. Together, the costume director and Quicksilver worked to ensure that the texture, fabric, and design of the costume was true to the 1980s era. For Amy, the idea behind reviving the vintage culture was to impress two of the age brackets. For the youth, the outfits could be a source of inspiration, and for the elders, a way to reminisce about the old fashioned. She also mentioned that dichotomy in the sense of style prevalent in the 80s favored the concept of two planes of existence in the show, real life and the upside down. So in the Quicksilver Archive 80s era, the costume crew was able to find pieces that had a colorful and happy look to them, whereas some of them had a really dark, intense look. Prison or an Airbnb? Just when you thought Stranger Things couldn't get any stranger, here's another mind-boggling rental coming your way. In the episodes of Season 4, we find Hopper in a prison, more than 100 years old, in Lithuania, called Lakiskis Prison. The prison had a sinister, cold, and intense vibe that the showmakers were going for. Now here's the fun part. That prison shut down in 2019 and now serves as an Airbnb. Believe us, this wasn't easy for us to digest either. But the rooms in this century-old prison have a cozy 1980s vibe, with comforters and fairy lights, which isn't usual for prisons to offer. No matter how welcoming the prison/Airbnb might be, we suggest you think twice before booking a room. We're nothing but thrilled for the second volume to hit our screens. Apparently, the finale episode has more FX shots than in the entire Season 3. So, cancel your plans for the 1st of July, mark your calendars, and prepare to binge.